While I was out of town recently, I picked up a gaming device that proves I'm incapable of learning. But wait, hear me out. I sincerely thought this would be better than the last one. I admittedly duped myself last time when I bought that 308-in-1 Data East console by not paying attention to the fact that there were only 8 Data East games on it. That's entirely on me. But when I saw this device, the Retrobit Generations console from 2016, I tried to pay more attention. I examined the box thoroughly and realized that the 100 games contained within are all supposedly licensed from these 4 video game companies: Capcom, Jaleco, Irem, and yep, even Data East. 100 licensed games on a device with HDMI out that was up for grabs for only $10 seemed like a deal I couldn't pass up, even just for the sake of pure curiosity. Going through the game list made me realize that this wasn't going to be the standard NES on a chip thing either. There are games listed here for the NES and Famicom, sure, but this list also features arcade games, Sega Genesis games, even some Game Boy games. Curiosity increasing. I figured this would be a cool thing to have connected up to one of the free HDMI ports on my switcher for whenever a specific game might come up for live streaming purposes. Overall, there are 6 systems being emulated on the console: NES and Famicom, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy Advance, and Arcade. Don't get too excited about that last one though. It would seem that the only arcade system being emulated is Capcom's CPS-1 board for a total of 5 whole arcade games. And even though there are other games in this collection that use that system, instead we get the home versions of those games. This is one of my biggest disappointments with this device. Time and time again, when studying the game list, I would see an obscure arcade title that I would love to check out, and then I'd launch it to discover it is actually a home port, almost always the Famicom version. To make it even worse though, the back of the box shows screenshots of arcade versions of some of the games, like XX's here, and instead we end up with the Famicom version of XX's instead. But yes, technically there are 100 games on this device, 105 by my count, licensed from those 4 companies. That's not manipulation by marketing or some other nefarious trick. Although actually it's 5 companies. More on that later. There's kind of a dark secret here about the game selection, but I will talk about that later on down the road. A company called City Connection now owns the rights to the Jaleco library, and they've contributed the most to this project, nearly 40 games. At the other end is Data East, licensing one single game, the NES version of Ring King, which ridiculously wasn't on the console that was branded as the Data East console. Although technically there are 2 Data East games here if you count Kid Nicky Radical Ninja, which was initially developed by Irem and then ported by Data East. You can choose to connect this device to a TV via standard AV cables or HDMI, which is great. So many of these devices just don't have that option. And surprisingly, you do get an image improvement when using HDMI, so it appears to be outputting 720p and 60 frames per second to my capture card. So that's a plus for the device. I've seen other retro consoles like this still only give you 480p via HDMI. I should try running this through the M Classic and see what happens. There are multiple display options for each game, which is good. None of them are good options though, which is bad. Original size will give you the actual game's resolution, which means it'll be centered on your screen with a massive void around the entire image. Full screen will fill the screen entirely, which of course will stretch most of the games to an unnatural looking state. And then there's scale, which is supposed to give you the game's proper aspect ratio at full screen, but it just doesn't do that in every case. So yeah, no great viewing options is a huge strike against it. Then there are problems with the games themselves. Whatever Gadget Twins is doesn't load at all, giving an invalid file format error. Varth Operation Thunderstorm loads in vertical mode and there's no way to change it. The chip being used to power the emulation cannot handle games like Mercs for the Genesis, and as such can't play that game at full speed. Famicom games like Kid Niki 2 and Kung Fu Master 2 are not translated, making it difficult to understand the premise or how to play them. Other Famicom games like Monster Club are also still in Japanese, but are easier to play. You just might miss out on the context of why you're doing what you're doing. Ultimately though, the selection of games that would make this console unique simply don't work. The console does feature save states, and there's an SD card slot on the back of the console, which is used for backing up your saves if you want to. Maybe you want to take your high scores over to your friend's house and show them off on his Retrobit Generations console. Sorry. Apparently you can also do some nefarious things with this slot, but don't do that. The trouble isn't worth it on this particular device. The biggest problem I have with the Retrobits Generation console, though, are the knockoff Sega Genesis 6-button controllers, which from my brief experience with them, appear to be the hottest garbage imaginable. Now, to be fair, I bought this thing used, and it only came with one controller instead of two. But the one I did get is completely unresponsive unless you mash down with more force than you should ever have to use on a controller's D-pad. Seriously, all this movement I'm showing you right now produces zero results. You have to forcefully smash a direction just to get a response, and there's no guarantee that that will work either. This controller makes every game here unplayable. Even just trying to get through the menus is a huge frustration. I did have 2 additional Retrobit Generations branded controllers in my spare controllers bin, which I guess I picked up in a bulk lot at some point, but they don't fare any better. One of them doesn't work at all, while the other produces the exact same results as the one that came with the console. You can reconfigure the buttons in the system menus of the console, which would be a great benefit for certain games if I just had a working controller. So you might be thinking that since these are just USB ports for the controllers, you can use any other USB controller with it. Nope. Not a single retro controller, old or new, in my possession does anything when plugged in. The Retrobit controllers are the only things that work on the console, and they barely work. It's a terrible way to play any game on this device, and it's ultimately why I will never, ever use it. Some reviews from when the console was first released seem to praise the controllers as being very responsive, so maybe my experience is just an unfortunate coincidence, or maybe the controllers rapidly deteriorate over time. No other controllers working with the device does seem to be consistent, however. So yeah, aside from the promise of easily accessible licensed video games, there's just nothing to recommend with this device. The selection of games will disappoint, some of the more unique games included are nearly impossible to actually play, the interface is clunky and unappealing, and over time the controllers just seem to devolve into straight trash. At least it comes with an actual power cable instead of yet another USB connection that you have to find an adapter for. But okay, look, to attempt to turn this whole thing into some kind of a positive, in the next episode of this short mini-series, and I seriously promise it will be short, I'm going to rescue 10 games from this device. Games that are currently available in some form on current gaming platforms. I'll give you some background on the games, what I think of them, and most importantly, tell you where you can play them right now. You know what I do here. Until then, avoid this device. Don't pick one up no matter how cheap it is. Just keep an eye out for something better. Anything would be better than this one. I'll be back soon with a more positive spin on this thing's library though, and I will see you then.